Well, let me tell you what we're going to do. First of all, I'd ask everybody to stay on the webinar as we have a little more work to do. First, we'll answer some questions that are coming from the jury for the pro and con legal teams. So it's important that we have those questions from the jury presented to the pro and con legal teams. And then at the very end, we'll turn it back to Professor Tadmore, who will have some instructions and tell us what's going to happen next procedurally, and a few requests and probably some thank yous. So please stay on the webinar for some questions and answers for a few minutes, and for Professor Tadmore. At this time, I would like all four members of the legal team to come on screen, and we'll present you with some questions that have come to us for the legal teams on terms of the proposals. I may not be able to ask all questions that we have from the jury, but I will try and ask as many as I can. First question, and these will probably require answers from both teams, and we probably don't need speakers from both teams to answer every question. If someone feels strongly, we could have both members of a team speak to the issue, but hopefully you can self-select who will speak to each question. Here's a question for both teams. Is either team working from evidence, science evidence presented by the science team from other countries that show that either a mandatory service program or a civil service voluntary program reduces polarization? In other words, is there any science that supports either a voluntary or mandatory program as being able to reduce polarization, whether it's political polarization or racially based polarization? So both teams should provide an answer for that. Who wishes to speak for pro?
I guess I can. And as far as I know, we are not working under any based on research of decreased polarization from any specific other program in any other country. But what we're doing, it's important to remember that our means of reducing polarization is not just service. I think it would be very possible, very easy, much easier, in fact, to make a service program, a national service program that does absolutely nothing to reduce polarization. But yeah, so the science team has found no data on reduced polarization, but we're using this more as a means, as a good way of bringing different Americans together, working towards a common goal that will benefit the country, and building a stronger national identity, which can increase civic engagement. So this is more of based on creating a scenario that fits with what we know works in science, rather than just basing it off of any specific known service program that has been known to reduce polarization.
Thank you. A spokesperson from the con team.
I can take this question. In the beginning moments of beginning days of this class, I had the opportunity to research international programs and how civilian mandatory programs have played out. And there are a couple of examples which point to how the mandatory programs did have flaws, which either led it to be currently debated to be continued or completely shut down. For example, in Nigeria, the Nigerian Youth Service Corps was established as a response to the Nigerian Civil War in order to inculcate that national spirit in the youth. This was a way to understand that in the wake of such a polarizing war, which is a civil war, they try to establish a mandatory service to engage the youth in rebuilding the country. Till date, the service continues to run, and there are numerous problems which come along with it in terms of the safety of the youth corps members, in terms of the costs involved, in terms of whether there is some tangible return from such a program. Similarly, in the Philippines, they had a program for the youth to participate in a mandatory program. However, the program was soon scrapped because of growing outlash against problems in the program, and is currently worked on being revamped. In Germany, there were debates about inculcating a mandatory program, but that has not led to any fruit. So overall, we can see internationally there has not been a very good response to establishing a mandatory non-military civilian service program, as seen by the examples I have listed below. And this is what reinforced our stance on supporting the voluntary program.
I just have to
Sure.
say that I don't think that what Nishant said was like based on scientific papers. I think it's based on his research, but yeah.
For the pro team, this is more specifically for you. And I think you did address this some earlier in the day, but for the pro team, it's a mandatory program, but how do you avoid issues of people not participating when it's mandatory, such as people buying their way out or in some other way avoiding service, so that in effect the program itself becomes polarizing because of the ability of people of privilege finding ways to get around the program, thus leaving people who are less privileged in the program. And that's been one of the problems historically with military conscription. So pro team, could you speak to how you're actually going to reach the desired population?
Yeah, I think that's an important point to make. And it's also an important consideration. When we were planning this program and like the ideas of how we were going to design it, um, our first bet, our assumption was that everybody would participate. But at the same time, there are instances looking historically of people evading the draft or finding excuses out of the draft for health reasons or other reasons. So we thought about what financial powers does the government have in order to minimize the possibility of this happening. So one idea we threw about, and it's listed in our slides, mine and Andrew's opening and closing statement, is reduction in social security, but we understand that too, for like extremely wealthy people, does not make a dent. But I also listed that there could be any other financial tools at the government's disposal in order to enforce that, and that could be increased tax scale to income. So it would have hurt anybody immensely if they were to avoid this for any reason at all. And because of the age range and the time of 18 to 30, we don't think health factors or any pertinent health issue, if you're 18 and let's say you have surgery and you can't participate now, you could do it at 19 or 20. So that should not be an issue. And with regards to people with disabilities, like Andrew said earlier, it's protected by the American Disabilities Act, and we would do our best to incorporate them in some position whenever possible in order to benefit from the program also, because they are people that deserve to be heard too, and also have their opinions and understanding that's part of like polarization, like different people. Hopefully that answers the question.
For the con team, question is, would you be specifically targeting to get into the voluntary programs, particularly polarized groups or polarized processes, or would you be attempting to have a neutral face to your voluntary program so that you were not necessarily specifically targeting polarized groups directly?
I think that's a really great question. And so we would be keeping a very neutral face, simply due to the fact that if you say, hey, join this, if you want to depolarize yourself, nobody's going to come forward and go, yeah, no, you're right. I am a racist. I am homophobic. Nobody's going to do that because let's be honest, you don't want to assign yourself those sorts of labels. So therefore, that's why we would have these incentives for people to join and to be able to do something that they are passionate about while also interacting with different groups of people.
Thank you. Here's something for both teams. How would you establish the stipend payments or other incentives financially for people in your respective programs? Because, for example, with respect to lost income, people at different ages and say different educational levels are going to lose relatively different levels of income or have relatively different healthcare needs or family needs. So how are you going to be able to provide stipends or other incentives targeted to individuals to cover the range of potential participants in your programs? Pro team first.
Yes, so our plan is to have the stipend scale to income, because with 18-year-olds, teenagers, it would likely resemble that of more of a minimum wage job. But if you're getting older, a little bit closer to 30, you're a bit farther along in your career, and we don't want to punish those people for whatever circumstances in their life made them choose to do that, do their service later. What we want is the flexibility to be available just so that you can plan around your life. You can do your own life planning. So there's no benefit other than maybe it just makes more sense career-wise to do it when you're 18 as opposed to when you're 29. It's more just that, yeah, so there's no financial, so we don't want any financial punishment for that. So it would scale to income.
Con team.
I think in terms of dispersing our economic incentives, I believe it should be a two-pronged approach. Firstly, especially since in terms of the participant, having some form of kind of confirmation or certification, or for example, I guess in terms of driver's ed, how you keep track of the number of hours you put in for driving, you could also have a way to electronically keep track of the amount of hours and the amount of time you're investing into the service program, and automatically allow the system to inform you about the incentives you are eligible for. That's on the participant side. On the side of the system itself, having access, like for example, FAFSA having a questionnaire for students to sign up for, asking them how much have you participated in this program, if so how much you have participated, and automatically start guaranteeing and incorporating those incentives into their application without having them to submit a separate application, would streamline the process as well. Even in terms of government role hiring, they would have that option in their application to discuss and say that, hey, I have already done this program and hence I am eligible for a non-competitive hiring process. And that's how we would try to disperse our economic incentives both to the participant and in the system.
Your Honor, before you move on to the next question, could we make a clarification regarding a previous question?
Yes, please go do so.
This is regarding the question about modeling our program based on any international countries that are carrying out mandatory service to reduce polarization. Just like to say that reviewing our notes, we acknowledge that we don't know of any governments that have quantified pre-service polarization levels and post-service mandatory service polarization levels. So therefore, we didn't incorporate that, but we are aware of other government mandatory programs that, for various reasons, either succeeded or didn't.
Thank you. Here's a question for the con legal team. I don't believe it's been mentioned so far in the plan. For the con legal team, would you in any way limit participation? Say somebody signed up for 6 months or a year or whatever type of program, would you limit their ability to sign up for additional subsequent programs?
So the answer to that is no. If people are willing to volunteer for longer and give service to their community for a longer amount of time, we do not see that as a negative thing. In fact, while the pro side might not care if people want to volunteer over and over again, we believe that that shows that the program is good and that people are enjoying it. So no, we would not be limiting volunteering.
a somewhat related question for the pro team. You talked about the age range in which the mandatory program would be applicable, but would you allow somebody who is, for example, over the age of 30 to volunteer for the program, even though they were not part of the mandatory coverage at that time?
I think, yeah, we didn't think of that possibility. We were thinking about when we were choosing our age range based on like what the science told us. We found that younger people tend to have more positive, like be more susceptible, as Mannix has said, towards changing their views. But definitely, I think in light of an older person wanting to join a program and serve in a different area of the country, I don't think that would pose an issue for us.
For the con team, here's a question that we've talked about a number of times as we've been preparing this. For the con team, how do you get people to participate who may be among the most polarized and the people that you'd really like to have adopt a less polarized worldview and who may hopefully benefit from the program the most, but may not be likely to volunteer? As one of our jury members specifically stated it, how do you explain something to someone who is not listening? In other words, how do these different incentives work to be successful to attract the right people into the program? Con team.
That is a very good question indeed. And that is something which we continue to grapple with in terms of how exactly do we attract that group of people who are regressive who are in regressive communities. And at least a part of the answer, if Madeline would like to add to this as well, is that while we are like, especially for this community which is not ready to listen, we could maybe draw correlations to the fact that these communities are regressive in terms of socio-economic status and how they play a role in society. We could maybe look and survey the way their quality of life is and assume to the fact that maybe their regressive mentalities emerge from their situation and how and this due to their socio-economic status in society. And we believe that we understand that it's not going to be easy for people not to listen, especially when they are of that community. But we understand that at the end of the day, the quality of life matters, and having access to resources to live life comfortably also matters. And we believe for communities such as that, we would be incentivizing them through healthcare, through education, through employment, which contribute to improving and upgrading their lifestyle and helping make the community less regressive. And through the mainly economic incentives, that could be the first stepping stone for these people to maybe open the ear and maybe understand our initiative and join our program.
If I may add on.
Go ahead.
Going along Nishant's point is we've been really discussing the fact of community. And perhaps while these people who are more polarized might not want to volunteer in, let's say, California or New York or some state that's far away from home, I can almost guarantee you that they want a safe neighborhood. They want safe and clean parks for their children to play in. They want to feel safe when walking or driving home or parking their car on the street. And so because of this, they're going to get involved in their community. And if even a portion of their community participates in our voluntary service, they're still going to reap some of those benefits of a safe community, and thus the dialogue that comes from that.
And let's throw this same question, but with a different phrasing, back to the pro team. With the mandatory program, you're going to get everybody in the program. But in effect, how do you get somebody to pay attention who's not listening, as is phrased in the question? Just getting people in the program doesn't solve it if the people are not in the right place to adopt and accept the information they've gained.
Well, I think it's important that we set realistic goals for ourselves, and that we can't try and believe that this is going to depolarize everybody. But one thing I think that's important to notice is that this depolarization doesn't just come through like conversations and like convincing somebody that they're wrong about their ideas. A lot of this comes from contact theory, which is just like it's working together, and it's just being engaged with another person and having to cooperate with them towards some tangible goal. And a lot of this is a lot more subconscious than it is conscious. So even if these people might not be consciously like ready to change all of their ideas, that doesn't mean that this interaction with a homogenous group can't help them and can't help depolarize. And again, we cannot guarantee that this will help with every participant.
Just to add on that, Your Honor, just to build on, if I may, to build on contact theory, part of it also requires, as one of the output conditions is cooperation. It means every member requires somebody else in order to achieve their goal. So we believe that itself, with like institutional facilitation, would minimize the number of people who would be reluctant.
Here is another question. I think we're nearing the end of the questions, and this would be for both programs. How would each program determine, for example, civic projects or community projects or things to work on with people in your respective programs? Obviously, any aspect of military conscription is obvious, but both programs are pointing to many other potential activities or civic projects or community activities. How would the targets be set for what those particular programs would do?
I think for mandatory part, it is difficult to ensure that every program that requests to get funding would get funding, but based on our research on what America has done, we believe that local governments are best suited in order to decide what their community needs. And we generally think this would be reflected even over time. And thus they would accept proposals, and based on the funding that a state would get from the federal government, that would determine how many projects in a specific state would get funded, and thus be able to have people participate in that specific organization. That's the best way we could do it. As a way to distribute funding, I would think it would be done proportionally. As California has the most number of people, they would probably have more number of projects that require more number of people relative to Wyoming, but that I don't think that is like a disqualifying factor for like a state like Wyoming not to receive any funding at all. But I think it's best, the potential loss is best minimized when we handle it at a local level.
Thank you. And for the con team.
Yes, so we completely agree with what the pro side just stated. We believe that communities know what they need. They know what needs to be rebuilt, whether schools need to be rebuilt or whether schools need more teachers. Communities know what they need. And we do not believe that it is necessarily the federal government's place to come in to states and tell them what they do or do not need, or whether they need more than another state or they need less than another state. We believe, like I said, communities know what they need. And so we believe in listening to communities, and organizations such as Teach for America already apply to community need. And so we would be working off of the existing framework of current programs to dictate how we listen to communities and what they require and how to best fulfill that.
Thank you very much. I think we'll conclude the question portion now and turn it over to Professor Tadmore. But I do want to thank all of the student members. So could all of the student members come on screen, the science team, the legal team, and so forth, so that we have one last chance to see everybody. I thank everybody for their participation, their hard work all term, and it's been good to work with you as we've developed this presentation and these questions and answers and the pro and con cases. So I want to thank all of the student members for some good work this semester. And of course, there's a little more work to be done, but this was to be the highlight of our work. And I thank you so much for your participation and good work today and all the work you did to get ready for this day. And I also want to thank the jurors for all of their questions, their participation. I noticed the number of participants has remained the same all day. I want to thank the jurors for their hard work, their questions, their work with us, definitely their interest and engagement from the questions. There were a lot of good questions. We tried to get to as many as we could, but we'd be here for a week if we did every question. So sorry, we did have to make some choices as we tried to get questions answered. So I thank that very much. And I also want to thank all of the attendees for being at the program today. And now I'll turn it over to Professor Tadmore, who will provide us with our concluding remarks and concluding instructions, especially as to jury instructions and process, any further opportunities for questions, and what we'll do next. Professor Tadmore.
All right, thank you very much, Bill. I want to echo what Bill said. I can speak for myself that I was very impressed with all of the students. I think you all worked very hard and really did a phenomenal job. So I do think, like Lauren said before, we should give you a round of applause to all the students. You know, the jurors and the audience can't applaud because they're attendees, but they're applauding in their heads, I hope. So thank you very much for the effort. Those of you that are watching don't know how hard they've worked. Maybe you can tell from the presentations, but Science Court is an investment, kind of like a service program. I think the return on the investment outweighs the work that goes into it. But it certainly, they worked very hard throughout the semester, and getting on top of a topic like this and understanding what the questions are, and then researching them and putting together these cases that you just heard was very challenging effort. And so really hats off to them. So in terms of the next steps, we have a couple of things. The jurors in the audience have a deliberation tomorrow. The deliberation is from 2 to 5. That's closed to the public. That'll be just the jurors, and you the jurors will get emails with instructions on how to join. Of course, there'll be another Zoom call, and you'll get information on how it is that you're joining and how to do that. So just pay attention to your emails about that. What the jurors will do is they'll deliberate for however long they need to come to a decision between the two cases that you just heard. The verdict will be announced Tuesday. We'll have another public event Tuesday, April, what is it, 27? Yeah, at 4 p.m. And that's when the verdict will be announced, and then we'll open it up to a public discussion at that point. And so I'll send out an email about that as well. And everybody who participated today I'll send it out through the Science Court mailing list, but in addition, you'll get an individual email if you participated today. So I invite you all to of course, come to that to hear how it all turned out. In terms of the last thing, we have a request for you is we have a survey. Many of you filled in a survey before you joined this event, and we want to have a follow-up survey to measure the effect. You know, just like again with the service programs, we want to see that Science Court is effective, and so we're testing it. And so we'd really appreciate it if you could fill in a short survey, both to help us and also to give the students feedback and for all the hard work that they did. And that'll help us as well to and them to know how things are going. And so now this only applies to the students, to the staff, the instructors, and to the audience, not to the jurors, because jurors, you'll get your own survey at the end of the deliberation. So Lauren is about to put a link in the chat for the survey. The jurors, don't click on it, but everybody else, including the students, go ahead and click on it as soon as I'm basically done talking and fill in the survey. So this basically concludes the event, except I'll ask students and staff to stay on so that we can just have a debriefing following the survey. But for the rest of you, I just want to thank you again, really from the bottom of our hearts, for participating. You just invested a whole day of your lives in us, and we really appreciate it. And the University of Minnesota thanks you for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you.